Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Just a quick announcement. Next week we're going to be doing a screening of the Our Revolution Governors Forum that was held in Chicago on October 8th. We've invited the board of Our Revolution Chicago to join us. We hope to get as many of them here as possible. We've also reached out to some other progressive groups in the area, so we're hoping to have a real good turnout. So we hope you'll join us, bring some friends. Also, if you're doing your petition walks, remember the contest WCP Strong is the hashtag we're using on Facebook. We've extended it, so the contest will go throughout the petition circulation period. So get the pictures posted by the deadline's December 4th. So at any point between now and the beginning of December and you're entered into that contest, we're going to have some great prizes that'll go with that. So we hope you'll participate and spread the word. Tonight we are joined by two candidates. We have a candidate for Congress as well as a candidate for governor. So first I'm going to bring up Murri Briel, who's running for Congress in the 16th District against Adam Kinzinger.
Yes.
Ultimately, she's got a, well, I'll let Murri explain. Come on up.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys, for having me here. Thank you very much. You know, Will County Progressives is an amazing organization, and I have enjoyed being involved with them, and I thank you. My name is Murri Briel, Amy Murri Briel, and I am running for U.S. Representative in the 16th Congressional District. I imagine, like most of us in this room, one night last November I went to bed knowing that things had changed and not for the better. But there were some things that were being missed. There were concerns globally about this man's ideology, but values were no longer important. Values that my husband Steve, hi Steve, and I have worked really hard to instill in our three boys. The value of honesty, a respect for women, and the understanding that what unites us is so much stronger than what divides us. And those values were being ignored. The election of this man sent a message to our children, to my children, that these values meant nothing. I knew I had to do something to change that. You see, I believe that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things if we're given a chance. We build neighborhoods and communities, and those neighborhoods and communities together are going to be the key to our future. And then I sat back and watched as Adam Kinzinger stood mute while the president degraded women, and how he refused to call hate what it is, hate, and how he continually puts his own interests ahead of his constituents. And I knew this was a race when I belonged. So when I made the decision to run, I talked to several leaders in the community, I talked to elected officials, and one day I sat down with a gentleman who had been in office for decades. And we started talking about policies and proposals, and the topic of healthcare came up. Well, I was like, ooh, I know, I've got ideas, all right, let's go. So we talked a little bit, and he stopped me and said, Murri, tell me about your time working with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. He said, how many times did you sit down with a woman and the first meeting and solve all her problems? Well, I looked at him and wondered if I really heard the question, so I said, could you repeat the question? And he did. And I said, well, none, it's a process. And he told me I had just learned the lesson that too many first-time candidates never learn, that politics is a process. He told me that too many candidates think that they can raise their hand and say, free pizza in the cafeteria every day, and they'll get the votes. Never mind how to pay for it, never mind the reality. When he talked to me about this, it seemed to click. I had to understand that as a freshman congressman, I wasn't going to be able to go to Washington. No one is able to go to Washington and pass universal health care. But I can go to Washington and fight, because I know how to fight. And I will fight to make sure that not one person loses any of the protections that had been put in place by the ACA. That's who we need to send. I've worked in youth sports actively for the last 20 years. And my 3 sons go to public school, and my husband and I are 100% behind public education. We cannot continue to drain our funds from our public education system into the voucher system. And the GOP is dead set on doing that. We need to invest in our kids. I mean, think about it. If there's one thing a nation can do, it's to give their kids a world-class education. And we fail. We fail in that. No more money needs to go toward the voucher program. We need to invest in our kids. We need to expand before and after school care. We need to expand extracurriculars and bring the vocational programs back. Not all students are college bound. And when we talk about issues that are really important, we need to focus on our infrastructure. We have crumbling bridges, holes in roads, shallow waterways. How are we supposed to get goods from farm to market, from our manufacturers to the distributors, if we don't have reliable transportation ways? And when we talk about that, we also need to focus on broadband internet. Connection to broadband internet allows us an opportunity to grow, to be educated, to find jobs. It brings businesses into communities. Let me put it this way. Adam Kinzinger sponsored a bill called HB 2666. Anybody familiar with it? What it was an opportunity for the cable companies to pay, it was an opportunity for the cable companies to be able to charge you anything they want for broadband access. No ceilings, no caps. So Adam Kinzinger took $75,000 from broadband internet companies and sponsored a bill so they can charge us absolutely any amount. Does that sound like he has our best interest at heart?
Nope.
No. But I bet he gets a Christmas card from the cable companies. What we need to understand is that we are a community united. And that community can do amazing things. And I'm sure Adam went to Washington with the best of intentions, but he failed. He became a part of the problem. I want to become a part of the solution. And together, we can do something extraordinary. Thank you. I'm Murri Briel and look forward to earning your vote.
Did you want to take any questions?
Yeah, I'll take any questions, all questions. You want me to stand up here?
Yeah, sure. Might as
Yeah,
well,
I'd
sorry.
love to. Happy to answer questions.
Do you have a opponent in the primary?
Yes, I actually have several opponents in the primary. There are 4 other candidates in this primary. So,
What do you believe sets you apart from the other 4?
I believe that my background sets me apart from the other 4. I was born and raised in Ottawa, and that is where my heart is, and I understand the rural community. My dad was a union shop steward at Libby Owens Ford. My mom was a farmer, so I understand both sides. I went to Illinois State and did forensics, and when I left, I moved up to the big city of Chicago, so I lived and was very active in the city as well. So I understand the urban dynamic, I understand a rural dynamic, but I have also worked in for-profit companies. As I left ISU, I was a stockbroker. I know, right? Like a stockbroker. And I quickly realized that I couldn't sell something that I didn't believe in. And it was a discount brokerage firm. And that firm would tell us what to sell, who to sell it to, whether it was a good product or not. And I couldn't do that. So then I moved into recruiting and human resources and technology. And again, I saw how corporations had put their interest over their employees. I dealt daily with engineers, salespeople, administration personnel. And we would lay off 60 people and a month later hire 30 back, 30 more different ones, because it looked good for the SEC filings. I couldn't bring people into a company that I knew was doing this. You can ask my husband. I came home and said, my heart is being sucked dry every single day. And he said, it's time to make a change. So I was fortunate enough to go to work for Southwest Women Working Together. And that organization is no longer here, but it was founded by 7 women who had been victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, but their husbands were police officers. You know, that adds a completely other level, and this is in the city of Chicago. So it's hard enough for a woman to get away from a violent situation, let alone if your husband is that controlling and has connections all over the city and makes sure that you're followed. So they started a shelter, and it was a secret hidden shelter where only a few, even 10, 15 years into the organization, knew where it was, a safe place for women to go. And my job was to work with those victims, those amazingly strong women, and help them get their lives back together. I worked with them to help them find employment in non-traditional employment. So I did a lot of work with the trades. I did a lot of work with manufacturing, because non-traditional employment offers women offers everyone so much more than a job, a minimum wage job, working in a fast food restaurant. And when you have 2 or 3 kids to take care of, and you're alone, and you're terrified that you're going to be murdered or they're gonna come take the children, that job security, that knowing I'm gonna make $15 or $20 an hour is huge for these women. It gives them stability, it gives them some sense of becoming something. So I've worked in both the nonprofit, I've worked in, for-profit, and I think that's why, is because I have the best background to understand the diverse district.
Who were your other opponents for the primary?
Do I have to say her name? Sarah Davey, Chris Manelli, Neil Muhammad, and Nathan Arroyo. And we all have very different backgrounds.
What is the geographic location of your district?
It cuts into Will County. We go all the way down to Indiana, and it skirts the outside of Champaign, comes up, goes all the way west to Oglesby, Spring Valley, LaSalle, way out that way, comes up through the Rochelle, Sycamore, DeKalb area, all the way up to Belvedere in Wisconsin.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a long district.
it's expansive.
Then it comes down, and we have Shanahan, Minooka, Morris.
It's basically farm, right?
There's actually industry, but it is mostly farm and small businesses. Healthcare is the majority of the employment out there, and education. Those are the 2 biggest industries.
How did your district, since education is such a big thing, what's their support level for protecting teachers versus the whole voucher and charter school thing?
Well, they don't have a lot of support from a federal level. From a state level, they've done okay, but we've lost a lot of schools. A lot of our schools have had to close because of lack of funding. We've consolidated a lot of schools. So that identity isn't there anymore. And if I can, the reason that schools are so important to me is because schools make up our community. So in today's world, we have cars and we drive everywhere. We drive to work, could be 20 minutes or an hour away. We go to church here, we go to church there, we are involved, our kids are involved in a million things. Sometimes we don't even know our own neighbors. If someone new moves in, we don't have the time to get to know them. But you know where you will get to know them? At a school. Because out in these districts, we don't have a Rialto theater, they come up here. Or if they're in the northern part, they go to Rockford for entertainment. But that's not the same. Day to day, we use schools for meetings, we use schools for events, fairs, sports events. Sometimes the football game in town is seriously the biggest deal going on. And so schools are a place where it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're, whatever color your skin is, whatever faith you are, whatever your sexual preference, none of that matters, because we all come together and we find out, hey, we're neighbors. I live here, you live here. Schools make us really strong as communities. And when we try to destroy that, what that's really doing is that's pulling us away from each other. We want kids to go to charter schools and private schools, because then those local schools lose their importance and the significance. Not to mention, it's a great way to break the unions.
Break the what?
The unions.
Oh, yeah.
Education is so important, and our vocational programs. When I went to school, I went to Ottawa High, and we had the most amazing vocational program. We had an auto shop that you started as a freshman, and you would change the oil, and by the time you worked up to a sophomore, you would be working on the carburetors, and you'd progress all 4 years if that was a track, I guess, that you chose to do. But it was a working auto shop. The program was paid for by people in the community coming in to get their cars fixed. When these kids graduated, they had 4 years of mechanical experience. They could then go on to IT or another school, or they could get a job right away. And we had that. We had a child care center, which was for people in the community, and it was run by the students. We gave the power to the kids. They came up with the programming they came up with the advertising, they budgeted. It was the same with the cooking. We had a Pirate's Cove, which was all student run. So again, you start off learning how to julienne carrots, and by the time you're a senior, you're planning menus, purchasing, making sure that you have enough to fit the need. Those are things that we're missing. Not everyone is a college superstar, and not everyone wants to do that.
Right.
And we're forcing people into situations which also causes a work shortage. There are plenty of, the trades industries are desperate for people, and they don't get that. But being able to walk out of high school in a trades program helps the community as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what I see happening today is there aren't the jobs where kids can get that experience of working, because jobs are being taken up by people working 2 jobs just to make enough money to survive themselves. What do you see needs to change there?
Well, I would say that we definitely need to increase the minimum wage. I think it's too low. But with that, we also will increase other salaries. The average salary for a paramedic, someone who's gone through 3 years of training to become a paramedic, not just an EMT, is $17 an hour. This is someone who works 24 hours on, who saves lives. They have everything they need in an emergency situation to keep you alive until you get into the hospital, and they make $16 an hour.
That's nothing.
No, it's not. So no wonder that they have to go out and get a second job.
It's nothing.
And a lot of times I had a gentleman who owned an ice cream shop say to me, well, I can't afford to pay Sally. If I pay Sally $3 more an hour, I'm going to lose money. And I said, well, Sally has 3 kids, right? Yeah. That's not my problem. No. But if you pay Sally $3 more an hour, Sally is going to come into the ice cream shop with her 3 kids on Saturday or Sunday to show the kids where mom works. And she's going to spend money she wouldn't have spent. Now take Sally and multiply Sally by everybody in town. Now you've got half of the population making $3 more an hour. You're going to have a lot more people coming into your ice cream shop buying a lot more ice cream. Your profit's going to go up. See, there's not a limited amount of pie. That's what people don't understand, is that there's enough pie for everyone.
Got another question or thought on that whole thing. A minimum wage in Joliet and a minimum wage in New York City and a minimum wage in some little town in Nevada, pretty much different. So why are we talking about minimum wage statewide or nationwide? Why don't we bring it down to the local level and say, Joliet, for example, to say when somebody wants to come in and set up shop, that the minimum wage that you have to pay people here is what we say you need to be paid in order for you to live here without additional food stamps and housing and all this stuff. And some of these jobs that are, retailers and things, that doesn't really take any experience, that a high school kid can very easily make change at the cash register or stock shelves or something like that. Let those jobs be open for kids. And let the seniors, like me, do these jobs in the wintertime when the kids are going to school. And I'll go fishing in the summertime, let them do those jobs. There's a trade-off on all of this stuff if we just use some common sense instead of talking broadly. And you're talking about the power of the local government. And the power of the local government is really powerful if we really want to look at it.
Well, I have to look into it, but my understanding is that each city can determine their own minimum wage. The reason that we have a federal minimum wage is so that you don't have cities who choose to have their people in poverty, so you don't get the wrong people in place. So federally, having a minimum wage requirement is a good thing because it protects a lot of people. But I do understand, and I believe that cities and municipalities can go ahead and set whatever they want their minimum wages to be. I'd have to double check, but I think so.
I'm not an expert at that. I feel like I want to get involved, but I don't want to upstage you, though. But I'm a retired Fed. I was a federal examiner for 25 years. But I took a lot of things for granted during that whole thing, and I really was ignorant of politics because I was under the Hatch Act. So I was supposed to stay ignorant. I was supposed to be pure, a virgin. Now I'm involved in politics, and a late bloomer, very late bloomer. But this whole thing, to me, I vaguely remember that there were federal differences in wage in different parts of the country. But all they were doing was respecting local traditions. And to me, this is a fallacy because eventually, you think business plays off one area against another, and all they do is moving things around in order to get maximum profit for themselves and screw the little guy. And this is what we have to fight against instead of going along with it and saying, yeah, that makes good sense, because historically it's what has evolved out in this nation, but it's something that really needs to be changed dynamically. We need to be one nation, not 15 little fiefdoms, one nation. And that's why I wish to God I could have done more 20 years ago when I was 56 and not 76, because I'd like to be joining you in Congress.
I'd like to be there and happy next to me.
I don't think nobody's going to pay attention to me at this stage in my life.
No, we've got quite a few older people in Congress. You never know.
Yeah, I know Bobby Rush is my representative, and I'm not going to make any further comment on that situation.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, you know what kind of bothers me? Yeah, I've heard people talk about vocational training in schools that's lacking, apparently.
Significantly.
I went through vocational training in high school. It turned out in the end to be a job that I did after I retired from Ma Bell. And I've been in a labor union when I was with Ma Bell and everything, but what's bothered me is the exporting of our jobs to foreign countries. I've been involved in the electronics business, and these small shops that we used to have, there used to be, in Joliet, there used to be 35 shops in 1959. Today there's one. There's one left, and they're just about ready to lock up and be gone. The problem of it is they're victims of throwaway electronics that is manufactured in China. I don't believe we're enforcing any import tax on that stuff, and they're selling us junk that is manufactured for a price, not for quality. Because I've seen these, when I was still working, I've seen sets that would come in for repair back when sets were made in Japan or made here, and the sets would run for 20 years before they quit the first time. And I help my friends out down at a shop now and then, and one fellow came in and he found out he had to buy 3 television sets in 1 year because they bought it at a big box store, and I won't mention the name. They bought 3 televisions at a big box store 4 months apart, and he came in and told us, he says he cannot afford the economy anymore. And what we need to do is when sets are manufactured here, companies are required to carry parts and service support for a minimum of 7 years. When it's manufactured in China, you don't have to do that.
Good point.
And I guess, so I don't bore you with what I was done my whole life.
Not at all.
I'm like him, I'm getting worn out too. I was just telling somebody else I've got to find another committeeman for my district. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is we need a vision where we can import our jobs and get our jobs back, and then make the companies that manufacture products that are sold in this country responsible, so that we have some kind of a life that's not going to be, 5 minutes, use it for maybe 6 months, you throw it away and go buy another new one. And do you have any vision that what we can do to turn this around? Because it's a nightmare right now, and it's put all those small companies, that I was explaining to you, out of business. And those are lost American jobs that are never going to come back until we turn it around.
Everything's put American jobs out of business since Reagan. They haven't enforced any the Sherman antitrust laws.
I'm with you on that.
Because Tom Hartman was on a radio talking about every major city in the nation used to have its own hubs of different. They had business centers in each, and now a lot of those have been bought up, so that all those middle management jobs are gone from. St. Louis used to have like 15 major companies that were their headquarters were in St. Louis. Now there's one maybe, because all the others were merged out with acquisitions and all this buyouts and all this leverage bullshit. And this benefits the giant suck up, the giant sucking sound to the 1%. And that's all it's been about. And we've been docile lambs going along and believing that they were in our best interest when all they're doing is, oh God.
So what do you think we can do to get our jobs back there? At least start the trickle going the other way.
That's a really good question.
No, it's not. I'm frustrated.
Well, but it
Oh,
is
don't get me
frustrating.
started.
It's very frustrating. There's many different dynamics involved in that. It's a philosophy, and it's a philosophy for corporations. Story. My husband and I built our home 12 years ago, and we bought the nicest refrigerator we could afford. It was like $1,900, $2,000, which was like, was it more or less? It was a really nice refrigerator at the time. I don't know, it was expensive, it was double doors, it was awesome. We thought we're gonna have this forever. And 6 years later, it started to crap out. So we had somebody come in and fix it, and then we had him come in and fix it again. And I said to him, like, this is only like 5 or 6 years old, should this be happening? And he's a repairman, and this is what he does 30 years of his life. And he said, nope, that's about right. The manufacturers designed them to last probably about 10 years. Now, I think I still have a refrigerator in my family home that I had when I was like 4.
Still working.
It's still, yeah, it's like literally 40 years old, this refrigerator, and it's still working. But we make things that are disposable, and I think that's a philosophy because we think everything is disposable. We think our resources are disposable.
Including people.
We think people
oceans.
are disposable. We
Coral
think
reefs.
everything is disposable.
And we
And not
are.
everyone, there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us like you and me, and we all want to make it better, and we're getting active, and we are waking up, and that's what's amazing. But it's not gonna be an easy fix. We have to change the mindset. We have to get corporations and stockholders and board members to
We have to
understand.
tax corporations, and we have to get at them in a different whole dynamic. I don't
I
want to
agree.
upstage you, I really don't.
It's okay, it's okay, it's a discussion, I love discussion.
All right, you want to hear my craziest idea that it was published in the Southtown Economist back in 2005? I did a rebuttal to the fair tax. The fair tax is a Republican thing where they want to exempt all corporations from any form of federal taxation at all. They want a national sales tax. And originally, I thought it was going to be around 15%. They want a 23% national sales tax on everything, so that all corporations can be exempted from tax. These people have turned corporations into gods, and we have to turn this around. And when I rebutted that in a day, I've got a copy of it, okay? And I used just the two basic facts that I could find on the internet at the time. At that time, the IRS was bragging about they take in $2 trillion a year for the government. At the same time, the Federal Reserve System was bragging that they clear $3 trillion a day in financial transactions, okay, money transfers, the cash flow of the nation. Okay, if there's 250 business days a year at $3 trillion, you're talking $750 trillion of money sloshing around. We don't care who's getting paid. There's money to be taxed. Okay, now you need to raise $2 trillion. You got $750 trillion. What does it take to do that? 1/4%. Period. We don't need an IRS. We don't need any of this nonsense. And this is what galls the hell out of me, is this late in life realization of just how phony our whole system is, and how it could be completely done where you gotta force every goddamn corporation to pay their fair share, and to bring jobs back, you gotta charge them more taxes if they don't have all their employees in America. You have to have a graduated tax on corporations, starting at 0.5% up to 10%, depending where the hell are your employees. This is my philosophy. That's where we need. We don't give a damn how many martinis you have at lunch. We don't care if you make a profit or not. I'm going to use the words of the idiot that ran for president the last time around. If you can't turn a profit, that's your problem, you know. So fine. This is what should be done, to hold corporations accountable, because they are running our lives. They're running us into the ground, and we have to fight back. And I'm powerless to do anything about it except to shoot off my mouth. And we have to do this, and we have to recognize we need a complete revision of the whole system. We got to simplify it, not make it more complex. Make it something that people can identify with. End of story. Sorry.
No, thank you.
I'm giving you ideas.
Hey, you
want me to send you my whole idea?
I would
I'll
love
email
for
it
you to
you.
send me. I will give you my card. You send me all those ideas. I would love to see them. I think they sound really good.
I know, they're off the wall. They're outside the
not.
box.
They're not
completely
actually off the
outside the
wall.
box.
Outside the box, yes, but not off the wall. And I don't never really liked boxes, so. it's a good
Well,
thing.
they want us contained in boxes. They don't want us challenging the status quo of the way it's done. It isn't the way it has to be done. It's the way they choose to make it done. And that's what we have to challenge, is why is it this way? And what can we do to change it?
You and I, we're the seniors in here.
I know, it took me 76 years to finally get some smarts.
So I want the three of us to get together afterwards and see what we can do together. The three of us.
I
What do
think you
say?
three could be a force to be reckoned with.
Does that sound like a deal?
That's exactly what we need to do.
Because I
We
don't
need
have
to
the
come
passion.
together. You need to come together and put something together and make it happen, and you can. You guys have done this for so long.
'Cause
You
got
were
ideas, you got
experienced.
ideas, I got ideas.
That's what everybody needs to
And we
do.
got
What are
time.
your ideas on what
Yeah,
needs
we
to
got
happen?
time.
Like as far as
I
like
volunteer to
bringing
shop
new
now
people
this anyway.
into Congress? Or do you think we can change the people that are already there? Do you think we kind of need an overhaul? What are your thoughts on how do we get this changed?
We need new people, for one. We need a stronger election system that is not influenced by outside sources.
Term limits?
For leadership positions, absolutely. Totally agree with that. That would require a whole rehaul of the Constitution, and we can't seem to get 50 states to agree on anything, let alone 2/3 of the states to go along with it.
They're going the wrong way. We got too many governmentships and state legislatures in the Republican, and they're gonna call for a con to make us slaves instead of increase our freedoms.
You know,
3 more states, I think. 3 or 4.
Pardon me?
yeah.
3 or 4 more states.
Yeah, they're pretty damn close to it, and they know what they're doing. They've been contriving and planning this thing for a long time.
Yeah.
This,
Okay.
okay.
One quick
I'm
question.
sorry.
You're going to be part of a majority, I'd say, conservative district. So what are some policies that you have that may not be, Democrat policies, maybe middle of the road, or some even conservative policies that would bridge that gap to move people over?
Make them happy,
Well, I mean, it could be anything, too.
yes.
Not everyone's
Get them to
favorite.
vote for you.
Education is huge. I've been in the district, I've talked to a lot of people. They're worried about their schools. And in rural areas, you don't have the high-end charter schools that you can use a voucher to go to. And if you do, it's a 70-mile drive to get there, a 40-mile drive to get there. Who can do that? It's not realistic. Education is very important. The district average income is $53,000. That's the median income. That's not much. People want to know that they are going to be able to get a job and maybe only have to work one job instead of 2 or 3.
Thank you.
You understand? People want to be able to know that their kids are going to grow up and have a better life. I mean, look at health-wise. This is the first generation where kids are living shorter lives than their parents. We all want the same things, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether you're right or left, none of that matters. We all fear, we all love, and we all want a chance. Those are the commonalities between all human beings.
Right.
And if we can get people to start realizing that if you take a string, right, there's one end and another end, and this end is the right, the left, or for you, right, I've never been good with directions.
You're pretty good with that.
Right, left.
Do this thing.
Yeah, but if you're looking at me, it looks like I'm wrong, and I don't know, the camera flips things around. I'm very confused. Anyway, string, one side, very conservative, one side, very liberal. But what happens when you take a string and put the ends together? It forms a circle and they touch. So those folks who are so far out on the right or so far out on the left are actually more similar than they know. And it's coming up with those commonalities. When we start to just realize that we're all the same, that's when we're going to start making change. And that's what I want to do. Help people understand that we're a community. We're a neighborhood. That's what we need to be. I'll tell you, my street's a very diverse street, right? I have families from different parts of the world. I have several gay, I have a gay couple and a lesbian couple that live on the block, and we have an African family and a Jehovah's Witness, and we have our Mexican family and a very Protestant family. It's very conservative and very Republican and very white. And they don't get along with a lot of people on the street. But I'll tell you, when something happens, they'll be one of the first ones there. If a tornado hit our neighborhood and took out our Hispanic neighbors who are married and have 5 kids, they'd be the first ones over there asking what they could do to help. Doesn't matter their color, doesn't matter how much they make, or that their grass is up like this. And believe me, that gentleman, when his grass is like this, he's out there with a measure cutting it. But why? Because we all want to help each other. We all want to make that human connection, no matter who you are, if we need each other. And what we have to do is change our mindset to know we need each other every single day.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Edit out all my stuff.
No way. I love it. Hey, send it to me. I'll put my card. I want you to send it to me.
I will.
I
will.
want you
Give me
to.
your email
I
address.
will, absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. If you guys want to know more about Murri or get involved with the campaign, please feel free to talk to her afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and bring up Alex Paterakis, who is a candidate for governor, and I will let Alex kind of do the same thing. Just give us some discussion about yourself, and we'll do questions.
First off, I really recommend going next week to see our Revolution debate, because I got a little fiery in that one, a little bit. I opened up calling people out pretty straight bluntly, to be honest.
Good. I like it.
So I like your fight too. I picked a little bit of a fight there. But no, my name's Alex Paterakis. I'm a civil engineer by trade, went to Purdue University. Found there wasn't too many jobs out because of the market crash in 2010, well 2008, which led to 2010, and created my own businesses. I own a real estate business and I own a few outdoors gear businesses. I employ 50% veterans in my business. I pay my employees starting at about $14 minimum wage for my company, because my success is their success. And ultimately just give back to the community. You know, I saw this election coming. So in April of 2016, I'm Catholic, but I was at a Greek Orthodox church in Boca Raton, Florida, and it was Greek Easter, and I was sitting there with Grandma, and next to me was Trump's director of advance. He hands me his card, he's nice and everything, and that's what sparked me, because of the conversations that I had with him of why I needed to do something. Again, this is April of 2016, so well before the election happened.
Wow.
So I went and thought about it. I talked to my parents, I talked to my friends, talked about everything, and I just wanted to get out there and do something, because the more and more research I did, I was involved in politics in Purdue and Indiana, and kind of those, fighting the good fight for Democrats that unfortunately don't usually end well. But got reinvigorated and started doing my research on Illinois politics, and understanding that the same person had been in power in the Illinois government, let's say Mike Madigan, for longer than I had been alive. I'm 29 years old. He's been for 36 years old. And I kind of look back to what has changed in the past 30 years? What has changed in the past 35 years? Do we have a progressive income tax? No. Are social services good? No. Are unions trying to be busted up? Yes. And a lot of core democratic principles just never got passed because everyone was content with how everything was. And that bothered me, because I felt a little like insane, because I'm like, how did we have Democratic governors, we have Democratic legislatures, and some of these things haven't happened? It didn't make any sense. So I went through, and in October, I announced that I was running of 2016, and kind of put together my plan and my vision out there right away. So I let people react to it. And what was that? First off, I'm going to answer your question about how you get jobs back in this state. Vocational, which you mentioned, is 100%. I went to Stevenson High School up in Lincolnshire. If you wanted to go to, let's say, auto shop or shop class or anything like that, you had to go to College of Lake County, missing 3 periods. So you literally had to invest all that time to do that. We were told that you graduate high school, you go to college, it doesn't matter what degree you got, 4 years, great. You graduated, you had a good job, everything's gonna be fine. But that doesn't work that way. I lucked out. I had a good, run. I made something. But a lot of people, that's why you see the average age of living at home now is like 28, 29 years old. Because now they're paying student debts. Mm-hmm. They don't have the jobs that they were promised.
Non-dischargeable debts.
Yeah, which even if they pay them and religiously pay them, they don't get benefits, right? I mean, that should be one thing. If you're religiously paying your debt, you should get lower interest rate, but unfortunately that's not the case. Schools have been, especially in the state of Illinois, have been in-state public universities, the tuition has been rising. Yeah. And now the jobs that they were promised are not there. So that's why vocational schools, why in the United States, the actual measure is there's 5.8 million jobs right now that vocational schools could fill. But we just don't have the workforce to do that. You had mentioned about manufacturing. And manufacturing jobs, unfortunately, I don't think are coming back like they used. It would take a massive overhaul of a lot of things to come.
Take a change in the tax code and we could bring it back.
It would take, the amount of pressure, amount of policy would take, would be
It would take a
enormous.
miracle.
It would take more than a miracle. But ultimately, what we can do is there is jobs out there. They're not the same jobs that there were 40 years ago, 50 years ago, but there are jobs out there. As we innovate, new jobs come.
Great.
The only thing that you have to worry about is innovation going too fast, and can you train those people fast enough? And that's something we really need to focus here in Illinois. Also, I want to talk about agriculture. I don't know how many farmers we have out here, but okay, great. Is that I lived on a fun farm, so I didn't raise crops or anything. We had ponies. I had ponies, Princess and Maverick. Maverick I got to name. Princess I didn't get to name. I had a pig named Arnold. She was a girl, but I liked Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, but I understand, and unfortunately, agriculture education has been cut significantly, and you think that's like the Republicans' lifeblood is our agriculture and that, but it's not. Bruce Runner started to cut agricultural education, and it's 75% of our industry within the state of Illinois. That's why, as a new sort of cash crop and new sort of revenue stream, I'm looking at the legalization of cannabis, not only just for recreational use and collecting the tax dollars on that, but for hemp production. Everyone talks about environmental concerns. Hemp can be used for multiple different things. I mean, they even use hemp right now in a lot of car parts right now as a supplement for plastics overseas that come in. And you can replace plastic bags, so you start reducing your reliance on petroleum-based products. I got in a little debate with Chris Kennedy 2 days ago about, he had this plan of that saying we needed like a 6-month study to make sure medical or cannabis legalization would be safe and everything like that. And I rebutted to him, if it wasn't safe already and the studies weren't done, we wouldn't have medical cannabis already. So I'm trying to push that a little bit as getting rid of some of the myths that we've been talked about cannabis, and making sure that when we do legalize it, because it's going to happen at some point. I want to be first in something other than debt and jail governors in Illinois. So, I mean, let's be honest, right? We're really good at that. And it's going to happen nationwide at some point, and we can be leading. And it's considering how much our agriculture is part of our economy in Illinois, it only makes sense. I mean, Washington just got out tax revenue $230 million, and we have about double the population, so it shouldn't be that difficult. And that gets to everyone's talking point is taxes, right? Taxes are good when they go to the right purposes. But unfortunately, in Illinois, we have this propensity, and if anybody's in Cook County, of just raising random taxes because they haven't done their job. So we had the soda tax that was supposed to fill gaps. I know a lot of people didn't like the soda tax, got a lot of negative press, but it was a tax that had a purpose to just fill spending gaps that they hadn't fixed in 30, 40 years. And unfortunately, all the taxes that we have in Illinois today are very regressive. We have a flat income tax, yet we have high property taxes, high sales taxes, bag taxes, soda taxes, I don't know what else, air taxes, I think Ron Mayo's going through. But ultimately, those taxes don't affect the rich because they can afford to pay those taxes. They affect the poor. It affects their bottom line, when income tax is the one thing that can affect the rich. I mean, some individual, I'm not going to call by name, but you can assume, that get out of property taxes. The overall tax rate for someone that makes over $1 million is less when they get all their deductions. They can get rid of that. The one thing they can't get rid of is income tax. So we need to change that and get rid of the burden of the middle class and the poor. Because let's be honest, right? Every politician come up here, they'll talk about the middle class, they'll talk about the poor, how we're going to help them, we're going to do everything for them, and then ultimately they come last. Their lives don't matter to politicians at all. And that's a sad part of reality. So we need to change that. So I talked about education. Let's talk about minimum wage, right? So that's been a hot topic. You know, I think I want a $15 minimum wage. I think you brought up a very good point. It's a cost of living adjustment rather than a minimum wage that you proposed. And I'd like to see both those come together. And how do small businesses survive? That's the question. What we've seen in other states is they allow businesses to impose an additional tax to the consumer, so you're actually pushing that on the consumer, which I don't agree with. But what can you do is that small businesses make up most of our jobs here in Illinois. I mean, I grew one. I got to hire the veterans that I wanted to. I got to pay them what I wanted to, but I'm not everybody. To bring people back in Illinois, I proposed a small business incentive for businesses to start out and invest. So you come here, you work here your first 2-3 years, you don't pay any property taxes, sale or income taxes, or sorry, just property taxes, no taxes for your business. And we take that brunt, and then ultimately you have to stay here for 3 to 4 years. If you leave early, you pay a penalty. But you're allowing those businesses to get a start, to get them off their feet so they can hire more people, survive those first tough years, and ultimately pay those people at a higher rate. That's what I propose in that. Because a small business is what everything grows. How many people have family members that have left Illinois or gripe about when they're going to leave Illinois? Anybody? No? I hear it a lot, to be honest, and I hear it more so than I hope for, to be fair. And it's like I don't care about this. It's only going to be 2 years till I leave this state, 1 year till I leave this state. There's a lot of people giving up, and they have a good right to, because ultimately our politicians have played games for too long, and they either can't afford to live here, they're not getting the services for their family members, they're being overtaxed. And again, it's not that taxes are bad, it's just the fact that they've never been for what their purpose has been. So we need to change that, because when we lose 150,000 people, I'm going to get a little technical here. We've always lost population. Northern states have always lost population since the Civil War. It's always happened. They've been going down south. But our state is accelerating that more so than any other state. City of Chicago is the only metropolitan state that lost population. Lost 6,000 individuals. 60,000 of those were African American families being gentrified by Rahm Emanuel out of the city, moving to either Indiana, Houston, or Wisconsin. That's something we need to stop, because we don't get to collect tax dollars from those people. And guess what? All of us that stay here, we make up the difference. So we need to, again, invest in the state, and you do that through small business. Now I'm going to go back to higher education, past vocational, people that want to go to colleges, right? 55% of individuals that we pay taxes for, students, go out of state. So not only do we lose those sales taxes, we lose any spending ability because they're going to Iowa. I mean, I'm going to use Dan Biss, what he actually said. It's quite clever. Bruce Rauner has been the best recruiter for the University of Madison, Wisconsin, that Illinois has ever seen.
Well, he's got to keep his buddy Scott Walker happy.
Yeah, but that's the issue, is that we all pay taxes for our kids to go to school here, yet in-state tuition here is significantly higher than surrounding states, and other states offer incentives bringing our kids other places. And guess what? They don't a lot of times come back. They find jobs where they're going to Missouri, they find jobs in Iowa, they find jobs in Wisconsin, or they all go to California or Austin. I mean, that's a cool place to be. Or Denver. Denver's very popular too.
Depends what the major is.
Yeah, right. But see, that needs to change significantly, because if we need to keep as many people. I love this state, and many people love this state. It's a great state to live in. But if they don't see hope or opportunity, they're never going to come back. So that's why we need to invest in kids, and I'd love to see higher education become free at some point. We can do that with community colleges now. New York did something very interesting, which I applaud, is that, talk about the whole investment thing. They said anybody that makes under $100,000, family makes under $100,000, your kids can go to a 4-year college for free, as long as they stay in the state 4 years after they graduate. And if they leave early, they pay a little penalty, right? They pay.
How do you enforce that? Where's the enforcement on that?
The enforcement is moving addresses. So if they go 2 years.
Well, what are you going to do? Put a brick on them? Where?
They charge them, so they actually have a collection agency that goes after.
After them.
Yes.
If they're out of state.
But what it is, it's an investment, right? So we're going to put up front money for you. You say you're gonna stay here for 4 years, you get a job, you get property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes. We're gonna get our money back.
It's like trying to get doctors to work in small communities instead of being specialists.
Right.
Yeah, it's similar concept.
Yeah.
That's good.
But we don't do that. We don't invest anymore. We just kind of just say, we have this massive debt liability, we don't do anything about it, we just need to raise things will all come together and everyone will be happy. Well, not a lot of people are happy here in Illinois, unfortunately. And it all goes back to even our teachers, by the way. I had 2 teachers come up to me, and they're actually my age, they were my friends that went to college with, and they're like, my girlfriend, they went to Purdue with me, but they moved to Illinois. And they're like, my wife wants to move back to Indiana, you're in all this, what should I do? And I said, well, if anything doesn't change, I'd move to Indiana, because teachers are being treated so, they're like garbage here in this state, unfortunately. And they're the second or first most influential person in a kid's life.
Right.
And yet they're demonized in the media, right? These teachers have these lavish pensions that they're Bruce Rauner called CPS teachers illiterate, and I can tell you the first thing in negotiating with somebody, don't insult them to their face. He ran as an expert negotiator, right? That was his tagline. That was one of his taglines. But the investment's never there. We rely too much of our education systems relies too much on our property tax system, not the state actually bringing money to make everything at least at a decent playing field, because that's what kids deserve, right? Kids deserve, if you want to take the opportunity, great. If you don't, whatever. But at least you start out at it close enough to where you can make something of yourself and not handicapped by let's say a school that's being closed down or bad schools that are not being funded. And you see that in the city of Chicago. I don't know, I forgot how many schools they just closed. When you close down a school, you close down a community. And it's a sad thing to see. And you see Chicago, as I said before, 60,000 African-American individuals left the city of Chicago because they got pushed out. And that's the largest movement.
The ones that could afford to get away.
Well, and they sometimes have to, because the building, if you go to Chicago, there's 2 Chicagos, unfortunately. There's the white Chicago that everything's fine on the north side, and then there's everyone else on the east and west that are being pushed out because Rahm Emanuel's grand vision of everything. I don't understand why he's running for a 3rd term after LaQuan McDonald, but that's a different story. But that's what it all is about. It's investing. It's investing in the people that live here already and the people that will come here. And that's what I want to do, because unfortunately, us Democrats have been on the wrong side of history, even though we've controlled the state for so long. So I just want to take,
What are you going to do about outlawing all the other incentives that different communities use in order to attract things to them, like TIFs and all this other nonsense?
Yeah. So I saw a few things. So here's one of the biggest issues I saw is that when corporations get taxed, corporations bring jobs. We all understand that, right? They're not fully evil. They do bring jobs. They bring to
but they might not be great jobs, but they're jobs.
They bring jobs into the state. But what we do is we don't hold them accountable to what they say they did. So I was up at Motorola in Libertyville when they became Motorola Mobility. Quinn went up there, signed a huge tax break for them. You know, you're going to stay here. We're going to bring, I think, 3,000 jobs into this state. And guess what happened? Next year, they sold to Google and cut 2,000 jobs.
Yeah.
But yet they keep the tax break. You go to Peoria. What's big in Peoria?
They're moving.
Right. So you had a big tax break. Caterpillar's going to invest $3 billion in Peoria. New CEO comes in the next year. We're going to move Chicago because most of our business is overseas now, which is true. It is true. The developing world needs more, backhoes and things like that.
Right.
But it was too long of a commute for their executives to fly from Peoria to O'Hare to China or wherever they were going.
It didn't meet their corporate image.
Right. Well, the thing is, we give these things away, but don't hold the people accountable. If you're going to give people something, they should at least, if they don't follow through.
Those guys give the money to get you elected. That's the problem.
Yeah, I understand. Illinois, it's bad too. The local elections, rather than national elections, when you bust caps, like cap spends, for example, this governor's race, the cap was $250,000 contributions. Now that cap broke, so literally anybody can throw in as much money as they can.
God.
That's why we're going to be probably the most expensive gubernatorial race in history, beating California, which is $280 million. So You're gonna be inundated. And that goes to another point too.
Already we got phony commercials from around there, one after, they're taking credit for the pet, oh my God.
Well, here's what's gonna happen. Well, here, it's okay, but here's what's gonna happen. And this is what I worry about, and this is why Donald Trump won with less popular vote than John McCain had in 2008. So John McCain had more votes than Donald Trump had, and Donald Trump won. Because the enthusiasm isn't there anymore. And for the average voter, not us here that like talking politics, they see it on TV news, there's 24 hours of news networks. They go online, they see it in newspapers online. They go to their social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter's, everything. They see it on there. They get robocalls, they get this. And people just get so fed up of, they just don't want to be even part of it because everyone's the same. And we got to break that mold. And that's one of the huge challenges we have, especially with my generation, too, is that we had Barack Obama. He brought a lot of young people into the spirit. Bernie Sanders came along, and he brought some young people up. And ultimately what happened, Bernie lost, and then all those young people got disenfranchised and said, well, my guy didn't win, so I don't care anymore. Some people, not all people, but it happened. And some Bernie voters did vote Donald Trump because he talked about the economy more so than Hillary Clinton, because ultimately it's about the economy to most people.
No, a lot of Bernie people went for Jill.
Or Jill.
They'd have to be nuts to go for.
I understand, but it happens. The working class, it's all about the economy. All the other things are great. LGBT rights we need to protect. Healthcare we need to protect, but most people just want to live a comfortable life and to get by.
Right.
And I think the Democratic Party has strayed from that and gotten taken down roads that Republicans want us to go down more so than distracting us from actually the root cause of problems.
What we've got to do is bring back the authority of the union. Back during the days of Roosevelt, who pushed unions and helped to create unions, and Truman, we had 40% of the workforce almost was union people. And that's where the Democratic Party got its strength, was from those contributions from union dues.
Yep.
Now it's less than 10%. So both parties feed at the same corporate feeding trough.
I understand.
They're both beholden to different factions of the corporate system.
Well, you look at,
and that's the dynamic we have to go against.
Well, Bernie Sanders had a bill to allow people to buy drugs legally from Canada, which are cheaper. And what happened is he had 12, or I think it was 11 Republicans side with him on that bill, and 12 Democrats, not including Cory Booker. Because guess who feeds their pockets? The pharmaceutical companies.
Of course.
Again, it's all about money, unfortunately. And you talk to any scholar, it's money first.
That's what happened because we let it happen.
Yep.
And bringing this around, it takes an increase. It takes a public awareness, and there are so many people that have no idea of the history of what has evolved in this country and the dynamic. And you have to bring it back. You have to support unions. You have to actually say unions are the strength of this country. They're the strength of the middle class. You have to bring them back. And that's one of the things you should be supporting in your campaign, is unionism, because the people have absolutely no bargaining power in their own right. One guy against a big corporation is nothing. Go get lost. There's the door to bite. And I talked to him.
No, he's good. He's all right.
I'm
no,
sorry.
And you're 100% right. And how do you do that? You build up those 5.8 million jobs, which are vocational jobs, which are union jobs. We're a little blue island of not right to work. So everyone around us is right to work laws, right? Which is interesting because what do Republicans hate? They hate government legislation telling them what to do, and right to work law is one of those putting government restrictions on something, which doesn't make any sense based on their philosophy.
I know what I call right to work.
Yeah. So that's the hypocrisy in a lot of things. And I wish I could say that Republicans are the only ones that are, hypocrites. But unfortunately, there's a lot of Democrats too, unfortunately.
Because it's the whole system.
Yeah. I just wish, between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, they spent $1.5 billion between their election. If that went to something good, not to advertising agencies. I talk to people at ABC, NBC, all the anchors. They're like, I wish I got some of that cut, but it's just my boss that gets all. These are the anchors. They don't get any more. It's all the advertising agencies that unfortunately take that cash rather than something good. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, what do you think about getting some of our union employees back to work and improving our infrastructure. When Rauner took office, and you guys are, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the only on the highway was put on hold. That was supposed to connect Lorenzo Road down, not far from here, if you know where that is, over to Highway 65 in Indiana, which would relieve a lot of traffic that's on I-80, and even some of the traffic out here on Route 53. I know coming over here to this very meeting, I got a small car, and they got us all heading to the right-hand lane, and there's, guess what's in the two-tire track?
Yeah.
There's two holes in the roadway that you have to drive on that'll swallow up my front tires.
Yep.
But that's one thing, but we need to get our infrastructure going. I'd like to know your plan on getting our union workers back to work on that. And one more nerve with me is the little town of Streeter. Recently, within the last 12 months, maybe she can, lost their hospital. And the residents of Streeter have to drive to the closest hospital or the ambulance, which is Ottawa. And
It's at least a 20-minute drive.
well, it depends how fast you drive.
Exactly.
Yeah. What can we do to, get to pay our physicians accordingly and to be able to keep facilities like that open? Because God only knows, I could be down there and need a physician, and they're gonna have to drive me 20 minutes to Ottawa?
Yeah.
And lastly, I like the ice cream store you have in Ottawa off of Route 6.
Pardon?
The ice cream store you have off of Route 6 is a real one of my favorites.
JJ's.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's worth the ride in the winter, in the fall when you see all the colors on Route 6. But anyway, I'm looking for help with infrastructure and to, prevent our hospitals and Streeter. That used to be a big railroad town years ago. And it was a place to be. Now, they lost their hospital, and if you've been there, and I invite you to go down their main drag and just take a look at it. They got more stores shuttered on the main drag of Streeter than we have in Joliet.
Yeah. Well, first question is that, so as a civil engineer, I actually created some of that traffic mess for you because at least if you were at 294 up by north there, because I was the one, when they widened 294, I was on a few projects creating traffic for everyone up there. But ultimately, infrastructure improvement and especially downstate, and I say downstate meaning anything under the Cook County boundary line needs to have investment into it, because I actually travel down here in Joliet often, and I go under that bridge that's right here, and that bridge is full. Under that thing is like, I don't even know what's left of it. Yeah.
That's the two holes.
Yeah, there's tons. So I understand. And that, unfortunately, has been secondary to the state. The state's been putting, things into 355, 294, everything around Chicago has been built up and widened, while everything else has kind of been left out to dry. And that includes our bridges too. A lot of our bridges here in Illinois don't pass muster. They're D's or C's in structural integrity. And that gets dangerous at some point, because you're literally, this ring, and it's not a pretentious pinky ring, so I just want to say, but it's my Order of Engineering ring, and it came from Canada, but most people in the United States wear it now. It's to say that you hold that, it's morally, it's with your writing hand, and you're going to be morally responsible for people's lives. What you're going to do is going to affect people's lives, and what you do is could, like I said, just affect people's lives.
You should make that a selling point.
It's true. People think it's a pretentious pinky ring, like I'm Dr. Evil, but it's not.
We're not aware of that.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
And that's something we need to invest in, because it's ultimately going to keep people's lives. We don't want to see what happened in Minnesota when that bridge collapsed in Minnesota, which was design error, by the way, from the 1950s. Someone made a math mistake and they didn't repair it fast enough. We can't see that.
What can we do to get our infrastructure back restarted again and get these hospitals open?
Well, something that happened recently was the Safe Roads Amendment. Again, they kind of masked it as Safe Roads Amendment, but it pretty much lockboxed funds that were from the tollways back, saying that you can't just put this in the general fund and kind of just throw it everywhere. Because the tollways are supposed to be reinvested, all the money's supposed to be reinvested in highways. It was the same thing with lotteries and gambling. It was supposed to be all invested in education, but only about 25, 26% gets thrown back in education. The rest goes in the general fund. God knows where the rest of that goes. So that was one step to kind of, I hate lockboxing things like that because they shouldn't need to be, but our politicians didn't treat us, I mean, they lied to us constantly, so it needed to be done. So that's one thing that's gonna help too, is those funds to start coming back into roadway projects to help rebuild bridges and things like that. But the investment is still going all the Cook County, Lake County, McHenry, all that kind of northern swatch. What it needs to go is the outer border town, or towards Rockford and towards the south, because everywhere I go through some small cities, like some really small cities, beautiful cities, and a lot of people are leaving, a lot of things are vacant, and there needs to be reinvestment in those communities, those river towns, things of that nature. And that starts out with getting people working down there, getting infrastructure built down there. That's what got us out of, one of the reasons got us out of the Great Depression was investment in public works projects. Second question you had was about hospitals. I can't answer the third question because that was a statement. I don't know JJ's, but,
Try it out.
okay.
It's worth the try.
But hospitals, so I'm all for consolidation of government. So up north by where I am in Lake County, we have like triplicate amount of government that doesn't need to happen because the cities are able to take care of themselves. So we have townships on top of that, and then it just gets complicated. There's duplicate jobs, we'll put it that way. But we also have to be prepared is that townships sometimes hold smaller cities together in more rural areas. When the city starts to fail, the township can pick that city up and put that in their network. So it's making sure that those townships have enough money to be able to put something that can affect every single piece of the city, or all the cities in their township, to build those hospitals and things of that nature, or urgent care facilities, minimum, right? Maybe it can't be a hospital, but there needs to be an urgent care facility. And with this budget stalemate that we had, right? So everyone knows about the budget. We didn't budget for 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
What did that actually do? It helped Bruce Runner cut a lot of things without one piece of legislation. Social services started getting paid, workers started getting fired.
He stiffed a lot of people.
Yep. Schools had to cut staff. So without one piece of legislation, he got exactly what he wanted, because to hire those people back is exponentially difficult. And unfortunately, some of those social services, urgent care facilities, and those programs couldn't even start up because the other ones were falling through. So it's actually getting a balanced budget every year, funding those social services, because a lot of families, I get calls all the time, and I wish I could help people, but unfortunately our laws are our laws right now, is they can't get the health care they need for their family members, either their young kids or their parents. And they have to move somewhere, or they find somewhere else to move, because that's their only hope at this point, because Illinois bureaucrats have been messing around with the situation for so long.
Where is better to move to?
Well, a lot of people moved to Wisconsin, a lot of people moved to Houston. I don't know why. Kentucky's a no-no. Chris Kennedy stole that one from me, that joke, by the way. I'm not petty, but that one was petty. But I said, why would anybody want to ever go to Kentucky? You stole that one, but it's okay.
Not for Rand Paul.
That's all right. No, Mitch McConnell's down there too.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are moving to Houston. Houston will be the third largest city in the United States within the
It's
next
the
10
fourth
years.
right now.
Yeah. And we're going to just continue to lose population. And to me, that's scary as a Democrat, because the last elections that we had were all Cook County, right? It was blue Cook County, and even like East St. Louis and South, those were all blue at one point.
Right.
But now we just have this Cook County, and we're losing the most population out of Cook County.
Right.
So we're going to be turning into, even though we're a blue state now, we have the potential of turning into a conservative state.
And that's what scares me
Yeah.
with CD1.
Yeah. And how did it get that way? It started with local elections. It started with Tea Partiers organizing, successfully organizing. I give them that. They actually came together and put pressure on their government officials. Now, I don't agree with their policies, but they made them go the way they needed to, or to go to be elected.
That's what we've got to start doing.
Right, and they got in, and they got into local townships, they got into school boards, they got into everything, and that seeded the base. You want to know where the money comes from? When all those people are in power, the money comes from. And unfortunately, that's the case today. And Democrats have to come together. But unfortunately, right now, we still have this schism. There's the progressives, and then there's the Neo-Democrats, we call them, right?
Neo-libs.
Neo-libs. And I think there's still a battle being had within the party, and that scares me as well too, because I think the progressives want to be included, but then the neoliberals kind of push back at that a little bit, saying, no, we're still in charge.
Brown said it all. He said, where else are they going to go?
Right. And unfortunately, that puts strain on any movement that we can put together. Whereas the Tea Party, when they put a movement together, they were so collected that they forced their people to go farther right. Again, I don't believe that's right, but that's what they ultimately did. They came together and pushed it. And Democrats, we got to figure out that we're the same.
We got to push them further.
And if more people get out to vote, usually Democrats win. But there has to be that excitement, and there is not that excitement as much as there used to be anymore.
We can't have fatalism, we have to have hope.
Yeah.
Bernie had excitement.
He did.
Yeah, Bernie did it, but then he caved in.
Well, with Bernie Sanders, I didn't agree with everything Bernie Sanders did, right? Again, it's just, I don't agree with everything Bernie Sanders said, but
Nobody agrees with anybody 100%.
He put in place a challenge to what Democrats should be, what Democrats used to be.
Right.
And that got so much pushback from his own party that they try to conspire against him, which is not a fair election
Well, they were
process.
embarrassed. They didn't want to be reminded.
Yeah. And again, that's not fair. If you disagree with somebody, you should be inclusive of their ideas. You shouldn't be scared of their ideas. But unfortunately, that's the case. The people with power want to hold into that power exclusively. Yes.
You know, we're talking two things here. We're talking unemployment,
Mhm.
and then we're also talking, we got all this stuff we have to do.
Mhm.
And we're not connecting the two,
Mhm.
because unemployment is costing us money.
Yep.
And having all this work to do that we can't do because we don't have enough money, you know, we're not looking at the bigger picture. In other words, what you're talking about here is something even bigger. We need to do something even bigger than that in order to bring all these things together.
Yeah, well, think about, I think the recent total was $400 million in infrastructure for Amazon, to court Amazon into Illinois. And, you know, the numbers actually don't match up. We actually lose out on a deal like that. They actually don't match. If they actually were beneficial to us, great, right? If we're getting the tax revenues, we're getting the sales tax, income tax, property taxes, and those jobs are 100,000 plus. Most of the majority of jobs are 100,000 plus jobs, which is good because people are going to hopefully spend more money. But unfortunately, when they went through the economics of this,
What
it doesn't make
percentage
sense.
of those jobs are going to be 100,000?
They said, again, you can't take their word for anything. They said at least 50%.
No.
But that's, again, you're taking their
Be
word
lucky
at
to
it.
have 20%.
But that's where money comes from. And as money leaves a state, when people leave a state because either they're at tax exhaustion or they don't see that opportunity, we can't do those things until we stop the attrition rate that we have today. Or else our taxes are going to keep going up. You see that actually in the city of Chicago. I think Rahm Emanuel raised property taxes the 6th time in 7 years or something of that nature because they can't get their
There's no choice.
budget in line.
There's no choice.
And we were criticizing Bruce Rauner as Democrats about a balanced budget. We didn't have one for 15 years before that. So we got to look insular at ourselves and say, hey, what are we doing? Where can we improve? What can we do to make people's lives in Illinois, what can we do to make their lives enjoyable? And unfortunately, we don't. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll ask you my question.
It's okay.
This is my question. Agriculture, you mentioned.
Yeah.
We're a big ag state, obviously. We're also a big agribusiness state. Agribusiness throws a lot of the money into JJC, for example, into education around agriculture. I'm wondering if you're familiar with the study that came out of UNESCO in 2013. About 60 researchers all over the world looked at what's it going to take to feed people with climate change, with everything else that's going on. And what they came back with was local food, supporting people to grow and sell more of their food local to themselves.
Right.
Not shipping it all over the world in big corn and soy and whatever. And I've asked pretty much every candidate so far about that, but none of them are familiar with the study or have any comment on it. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on more localization of food, more having a reserve, having the ability if something happens. At this point, we're like, I don't know, 2 weeks away from starvation if something goes wrong in the big hoo-ha of agribusiness. When you think about that, plus about 50% of climate change can be directly attributed to agricultural practices. The nice thing about agricultural practices is some of that could actually be reversed through practices that sequester carbon, preserve the soil, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So first off, the reason that localization can't happen today is the corporate farms that occur. So most of our farms have become corporate farms within the state of Illinois. So they're obligated to provide all their foods to, let's say, Red Gold for all the tomatoes or things like that. So you'd have to pass legislation that started removing the influence of corporate farms. That's one thing I'm scared about, that we'd have to make sure if we do legalize weed and hemp in Illinois, that it can't be corporate farmed, right? It's individual farmers working for a profit. To talk about your life, I think 2/3 of all water use in farming goes to like livestock, and it goes to irrigation of those crops. So that's one thing that unfortunately is a case of just overconsumption of human beings, of eating too much meat, eating things like that. But let's look at Illinois. What do we produce most of? We produce corn and soybean. Corn is very detrimental to soil. We produce corn because corn goes in a lot of different things. So you'd have to work with farmers to start diversifying their actual, what yields would be. And I don't know if anybody knows, everyone sees we have 15% ethanol within our gas, right? Sometimes they were producing, like, remember E85 at one point?
Right.
Ended up being a myth that it actually helped with fuel consumption because it burns hotter, you get less fuel economy, you end up burning more of it. And there's been a lobby still with farms and farmers to kind of keep that mythos there because they're making money. They're making high money on corn and soy. So you'd have to work out with these farms, get them first off the corporate system in a way, which would be more than a challenge. Offer them incentives to get off the corporate system, at least here in Illinois, and look to diversify their crops. Because too, what I worry about as well is, like I mentioned earlier, corn is very tough on soil. And if we keep producing corn and corn and corn and corn and corn, our soil is going to be dried up and useless at some point. And that's why we need to do that. And you see farmer markets popping up everywhere, but you don't see them in lower middle class. You don't see them in poor communities. You only see them in affluent communities. And that needs to, we need to offer subsidies for those communities to be able to provide a marketplace for those individuals, or even the local grocery stores. Use the local grocery stores as a hub for that. But that's how you solve it. It all comes back to corporate farming and weaning ourselves off that. And that's how you get that.
Sure, but that's the problem. Like, how do we wean ourselves off that?
Right.
How do we get the political will to wean ourselves off of that when agribusiness is pouring millions of dollars into JJC and they want that money, right? Once again, we are addicted to a system that's killing us. How do we wean ourselves off of it?
It's incentives to do that. Anytime we had, so even like when we had electric cars and we had electric, energy efficient windows, things of that nature, when you offer breaks to people for doing things, like I remember there was I forget when was it, 2008 or 2010, where they had that where if you replace your furnace, you got a certain tax credit for an energy efficient furnace, energy efficient windows, you could take those tax credits on those things. So you have to offer usually tax incentives or some sort of financial incentive for those individuals to start moving off corporate reserves. To be honest, that's the only way to
We can
technically do
Illinois
it.
afford to offer incentives to do this? That's the whole thing. Where's it going to come from?
It's going to have to come, again, it all goes back to the investment. It all comes back for them putting a little bit more money, borrow it at a lower rate than we're borrowing. I think we're at 10% right now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, because our credit rating is shot thanks to
Well,
Murri.
I think Ronald, again, did that on purpose because
Yes.
his guys get to buy the bonds.
They
get high yields on those bonds.
Republicans are experts at contrived crises in order to get what they want.
All these things are, no, all these things
Okay,
are great
sorry.
too, but we do have the overhead of the financial situation, which we have to get under control first and foremost. That's the number one thing, because all these things will come out of that. We can't tomorrow fight corporate farming, unfortunately. We can't give kids a 4-year education right away. We can do some of these things, like move towards community colleges right away, because a lot of counties have the money to do that. But we have to get our finances in order. We have to reconsolidate our debt, which Bruce Rauner hasn't done right now. We're at 10% right now. Ms. Mendoza is fighting that right now. And we just have to get our tax plan in order right now to kind of keep people from leaving the state and providing the basic, humanity, basic services that every human needs first and foremost. What you would do would be something after, what I've talked about now would be something after those core, things are done. People's jobs, people's way of life, and their health care would be first and foremost. Those other things coming after. You can also argue that local farming does have health benefits. I kind of saw that coming.
Well, the fact that, climate change, we don't got very much time. I love these 30-year plans. We don't have time for 30-year plans anymore. I get that we have to do certain things before other things can happen, but feeding ourselves is the most fundamental thing that we do.
Yeah, I understand.
Truthfully, I thank you very much. You gave the most thoughtful and knowledgeable answer to my question of anybody who's come here. So good job.
You have quite a wide scope of knowledge.
I want to hear your opinion on it a little bit.
Well, my opinion is we're going to have to do a lot of stuff non-electorally, for one thing. If we're going to wait for y'all to get around to it, we're going to wait 30 years.
I've been waiting 30 years. That's all
We don't have 30 years.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I wish that I knew.
Yeah.
I'm involved in creating the Will County Resiliency Network, bringing together a lot of folks. I know there's a lot going on with the farm to table with restaurants, which is one piece. It's nowhere near enough, but it's one of the few places you actually see some viable work with organic farmers, working with restaurants, having markets, working together. But we need much more of that. And I'm just trying to figure out how we make it happen without waiting, however many years.
8 lifetimes for it, yeah.
We don't have that kind of time.
So, nuclear energy failed. That was supposed to be the end-all, be-all, right, to kind of save us. That didn't really work out. Ask Cyan up there and all the nuclear waste that's stored up there, unfortunately. Solar or wind power was supposed to be the next big thing. Turns out that's not, that's not the best thing right now. Solar power is probably where it's going to be at, and what Elon Musk is doing with solar panels and batteries, with the stipulation that mining lithium ion is still a costly practice that still adds carbon emissions to extract that. But moving to more solar off the grid and pulling energy off the grid is going to be our biggest help to do that, and it's going to have to be solar. And solar panels right now are becoming increasingly inexpensive. that roof did you see the roof that Elon Musk proposed? Mm-hmm. So all the tiles are, and it's like a lifetime warranty. And I think he's kind of, I don't agree with everything he's done, but he's kind of moved even like Volvo and some other European countries, manufacturers and companies, to move to fully electric cars. We still have...
Volvo is Chinese. It's owned by Geely.
Well, okay. But it's still Swedish in a way. It's still got the Swedish symbol. Austin Powers symbol. But what we still have to recognize too is that electric cars are good. Hydrogen where it should go next. It should go to hydrogen. But we're still burning high carbon emission, product coal to produce the energy which powers those cars. Now it's not as much as pure gasoline does, but that's in the right step. And then moving to a more solar grid, it's going to be tough because Illinois, we don't face the sun all the time. We don't face the sun equally all the time. We have snow that blocks panels, but getting somewhere off the grid a little bit more would help out significantly.
What's the problem with wind? That's the first time hearing about it.
Yeah, so wind, there's actually a lot of negative studies to wildlife in the area. There's so a lot of times the actual windmills, you ever go by those wind farms and you don't see them running because when they put them up,
There are no regulations put in place,
well, yeah, they get subsidies to put those things up.
but no service.
Yeah, they don't have to provide service. So let's say they could be producing too much energy to where the energy company's not making a profit, so they can shut them down. That's why you see them sometimes, a lot of them, like half of them running, half of them not running, is because of that reason. They're producing too much power.
Oh, wow.
So they shut that off. So that's why it doesn't work right now. I mean, local grids through solar energy, through local people creating that need and getting off the grid is where the change and movement's going to happen. It needs to happen because the large corporations they're making too much money off while they're still, coal. I mean, America was built on coal, right, and coal and oil. And we still haven't gotten off that. We're in a very unique position that most of our energy came from coal. Not a lot of countries have coal like we have. And, we're still burning that thing. So it's going to take individuals moving off the grid, providing energy back to the grid by producing their own energy to make major improvements and major.
Because even if you get the wind, you gotta have transmission lines to take it to where it needs to go.
That too.
Well, I live in a townhouse association, okay, and I am not an officer of that, but one of the things that I fancy that should be done, those kind of organizations are nonprofits, and what I was wondering about is whether or not something could be sponsored for association, nonprofit or community organizations like that, to actually be able to get financing in order to do solar systems, in order to get us free from ComEd to some degree.
Yeah.
Naperville used to have their own electric company many years ago. I don't have all the details, but I know of it, so I cannot argue the point maybe cogently.
That's okay.
But the point is, we need, if you want to get more away from the control of corporate control, we need to get things more down into the communities where they can have control over their own energy and offset this, and without a penalty, and develop a thing like this. I've already inquired solar energy of Illinois system. It's on the internet. Oh, we're not ready for, they want to sell roof panels one by one house at a time. They're not ready to take on whole subdivisions.
Right.
This is what we need to do. We need to analyze ways of getting our, to using what technology is to upgrade our communities.
Yeah.
Even in the inner city. I mean, it's not just for the suburbs. I'm a suburban guy, but maybe we should concentrate on bringing back the inner city and giving them some of this stuff.
Yeah, so you touched on two topics. One is
I know,
reinvestment in
I'm all over the
communities. It's
place.
okay. In reinvestment in communities, and we don't do enough of that. Look at the city of Chicago, for God's sake.
I
They
know.
just throw money wherever, Rahm Emanuel sees you, or go down. If you go downtown and go down the loop, you see nice little, shaded bus things. You go to the west side and south side, you don't see that.
I know.
We don't do enough of giving opportunity and money to these communities to make, because every community is different. This community is not different than one, it's a little different than one on the north side. We don't give them enough freedom. You got the oversight a little bit, right? But you don't give them enough freedom to build.
But you need
what they
vision
can
and
do.
imagination, and you're the kind of
Right.
guy that maybe has a vision and imagination. I don't have all the answers. I'm presenting
No,
a
you're bringing up
challenge
great
to you.
points. No, and it's getting that, energy is also, we're looking at LEED certification too. LEED certification is, energy efficiencies on buildings, and making that mandatory for any new buildings, any certification, building any new buildings in the state of Illinois, with the, the hope that we move that up to a silver, to a gold, to a platinum. Because that'll save us all energy efficient windows. I mean, the thermal loss, I can get into scientifics, but.
But redevelopment of whole communities
Yeah.
at a time.
Well, again, if you give the right incentives to people, things will happen. So
Yeah.
if you give the right incentives to someone, that's what happened with energy efficient, like I said.
Can you
first-
pioneer this? Have you got the vision to pioneer something like I'm introducing as a
Yeah,
concept?
you got the one
You.
thing. Yeah, Alex Paterakis, yes, that's how I person.
Yes, you. What makes you different from all the others? And can you actually do this? Can you have the vision and the drive and the imagination and present a picture like this?
I'm not done fighting with this right now, and
Okay.
the thing is that.
I'm trying to inspire you. I'm
No,
not trying to oppose
trust
you.
me, I'm more than inspired. Again, watch the Bernie Sanders, Our Revolution debate, you'll see I got pretty inspired there in some cases. I did a little bit. But everything's gonna be worth, the one thing, let's be honest, we're a capitalistic society. We're still gonna be capitalist, I'm a capitalist, but when things get too big, the reason we have checks and balances on the capitalist system is things don't get big, so big that they can't be stopped. And one of those things is energy, one of those things is media, and one of those things is Amazon. That's the third one. It's true though. I mean, at some point they're going to become too big for their own good. And Microsoft used to be there, but not anymore.
Yes.
They got split up. But those things need to actually be regulated, and there's been a propensity in the last, let's say, decade, 15 years, to kind of let those go a little bit. Let NBC buy Comcast, or Comcast buy NBCs, and making media companies very, like there's like, I think 3 or 4 media companies now. So it's fighting that and putting regulation in place that those things can't occur anymore. And it all starts with legislation. It all starts with getting that money out of politics and putting pressure on individuals that take that money, like you did with.
It takes people with vision that are not relying on the corporations to provide them the
I don't have
bills.
corporations.
Huh?
I don't have corporations, just my corporation.
Okay, so that's what
That's
we
it.
want, is a guy that's not gonna be dependent on having it written for him, that's gonna have a vision in order to bring change and bring back. Because these inner city communities, I mean, they're going nuts because they have no hope, they have no future.
Well, what do? Revert to how they make money. And unfortunately, sometimes that's crime.
Drugs and shooting each other.
Yeah. Well, if you get rid of legalization of cannabis, you get rid of El Chapo, which, El Chapo, right?
Yeah.
His main supply line was through Chicago. You get rid of marijuana, you decriminalize all of it, you end one of those lines. A huge major part of the drug trade that gets into.
That was part of Nixon's southern strategy.
Yeah. Get rid of El Chapo? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
Have you got a resume yet, or?
Yeah, it's Rich Miller. He's a teacher, not the one you think of, not Capital Facts, Rich Miller. He'd like that one though. But he's a teacher that I grew up with that I enjoy quite a bit. And I got my petitions and stuff over there. But it all goes back to the teachers being influential to students' lives. I mean, sometimes in certain families, broken families, a teacher is the inspiration. And we don't do enough to champion that, right? What is the really bad saying they say about teachers, right? If you can't do, you teach, and I hate that saying. Teachers go out because they have a passion of what they're doing, not because they have to do this or they couldn't do something else. So that's what we need more of, and that's what we need to stop demonizing, and stop demonizing the CPS teachers, and stop demonizing all teachers around, because we're losing good talent, unfortunately, here in Illinois to other states. Yes?
On the education note, we did the 529 plan when our daughter was a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So we paid for 3 semesters at an in-state school, assuming
Yep.
she would go to junior college, and then she was in-state school. However, now that she's a junior, and the schools are in the state that they are, I plan to stay and fight, but I'm not willing to give up her education for that. Getting money back into them is good, but so much has left, so many majors have gone away from here. How can we start quickly getting them back in line, back on track?
Yes, let me get this straight. So certain schools, right, have, what's it called? They're getting rid of like certain types of majors?
Well, and she's environmental, so that's the first one going, so.
Okay, gotcha. But the first thing, it is because schools didn't get investment. So Chicago State was one of the big ones. They took a hit because they were running out of money more so than anybody, and they've lost most of their majors. It's putting the money back in. So the fact is that the fact, it's all right, is that our tuition rates are just too high right now in a lot of state schools, and the reason that is because the kids that we pay taxes for are not staying in the state. They're, like I said, 55% are leaving. So schools are having to consolidate because they don't have the volume that they had previously that they could afford these things. And most schools don't have the luxury of a major college sports team, let's say like the University of Illinois or anything like that, to sustain programs. And it's been a huge disservice. I use the University of Illinois, for example, because they take more out-of-state students than they do in-state students. They actually keep everyone on a level playing field, which doesn't make any sense to me when we pay taxes to the state, and they have one of the highest tuition rates of any in-state school in the nation. But it's just, the reason those programs started falling wayside is because they weren't being funded. When we didn't have a budget, teachers weren't being paid, facilities weren't being paid. When you get those paid, the schools will start running. And a lot of families were in your situation where you don't know if you're that school, your daughter is going to actually be able to go and finish at that school because that school might close. That's the uncertainty, and that's why a lot of families during this budget impasse sent their kids up to other schools or other states. But when you properly fund it and get the funding where we had before, those things don't shut down. The reason things started shutting down the last 2 to 3 years was because we didn't have a budget, things weren't getting paid. I think we have $15 billion in unpaid bills at this point. So that's why those programs
Do
started
you
to fail.
think that they would very quickly?
They'd come back, but they'd come back unfortunately slower unless more investment went into it, let's say through legalization of cannabis or new sources of revenue, because when you get rid of something, it's very easy. That's what differentiates me. You're like, Alex, well, you're a businessman just like Bruce Runner. Well, Bruce Runner is a venture capitalist, which consolidate and get rid of jobs. I create jobs. I build jobs because that's what a small business does. And he's done exactly that. He's consolidated, and it's tough to bring those jobs back when they leave, because now you say, oh, we already made these cuts, we already have our budgets, great to go. But there's been damage, but there's not been enough damage, I don't think, to shut every program that actually started to lose money in the past 2 years, now that we're getting back and have an actual budget to work off of.
I have one other question.
Yeah, go ahead. It's okay.
It's kind of like a green energy question.
Okay, yeah.
Talking about, one would be like high-speed rail, what's going on with that.
Yeah.
Also, we have all the factories out there now,
Mhm.
that have shut down. I know Rockford has a lot,
Yeah.
Joliet, Peoria. Why can't we make solar here?
No, we easily
The
can.
jobs here, and I mean, I know Illinois has more pipeline than anybody else,
Mhm.
and a lot of the jobs here that pay are in fossil fuel industry,
Yep.
unfortunately. The first fracking permit was just given
Mhm.
out down in southern Illinois, where we have the worst fault in the United States.
Yeah, surprisingly, we didn't know we had earthquakes in Illinois until like a few, years ago when they started happening, right? And Oklahoma's had that issue, is that they've actually attributed fracking within Oklahoma to increased seismic activities. Like, that's proven fact. I mean, some science you can debate, but some science is just unfortunately fact to some individuals.
And even like, why can't we give incentives to organic farmers when we're giving them to the corporate?
Yeah, and it should be all fair. That's all about leveling playing fields out with things, right? Is that if you give incentives to corporations, why are those same incentives given to small businesses, or given, those kind of, this hand
Which
is
you
that hand?
probably run into yourself.
Well, it was tough. It was tough starting out. I mean, you got no financial help unless you had outside investors. I luckily started with $2,000 and somehow made something of it. I don't know how I did it. I still don't understand how I did it, but you don't get those loans, you don't get that opportunity, you don't get any relief where these huge corporations just automatically get it, right? Because they're big and they're going to bring everything and make everything fine. But let's say solar power, right? There's a lot of, there's opportunity to bring some manufacturing back to the States. The only thing that's going to bring manufacturing fully back, at least at some point, is going to probably be 3D printing of materials and CNC machinists and things of that nature, bringing jobs back local. The jobs of cranking out and everything built in Chicago, it's just way too far gone at this point, unless we were to impose a ridiculous tariff on China and foreign countries, which is not going to happen. We're a global economy now. But there is net new opportunity, and that's why I said with the small business growth, there's plenty of opportunity in high-tech and even high-tech manufacturing. With robotics and 3D printing is going to be huge, CNC machine, like all those things, and even high-skilled welding as well. So that's where I see the growth happening. Everything used to be built in Chicago, right? You see, I watch American Pickers sometimes all the time, and everything says, right, Chicago on it, Chicago, St. Louis, this. And it just became, with us not imposing tariffs at the right times and doing the right things, I mean, we became a globalist economy. It happened. But there's plenty, like I said, there's 5.8 million jobs out there that are waiting for the taking, but people just don't have the skill to do it. So it's getting kids to say, well, your college isn't great, maybe go to a junior college, see if you like it, or go into that vocational school. Then as you build the bench within Illinois, then those jobs also have a propensity to come where the talent is as well. So that's what we need to do, and that's what brings jobs into the state. I forgot, what was your second part of that? You said solar?
Just we were talking about solar, the high-speed rail.
Oh, high-speed rail. High-speed rail is a great idea. You ever go to Japan, it's like the most amazing thing in the world, by the way. So I think they go up to like 200-something miles an hour. They float, too. It's kind of cool, a little bit. I like the science behind it. But the biggest obstacle to that is the airline industry. That's been the biggest obstacle to high-speed rail because it's a direct threat to their line of business. think, because otherwise you have Amtrak, and Amtrak doesn't really get that much state funding, it's kind of slow, it doesn't really do anything.
I think they're the same trains that I rode on when I was a kid.
Yeah, most likely. If you're going a Metro train, I think they did improve one. When I was on the Metro, it was wrapped in a Miller Lite can look on one of the Metro. So that was the improvement, not the Wi-Fi they promised us a while back. But high-speed rail, again, it takes infrastructure investment. We don't have the rail, we don't have the network to build. I mean, some of these other countries started from scratch when, Japan got done with World War II. They started investing in new types of infrastructure. Germany, Europe, and when that, there's been 2 world wars in Europe, so they had to rebuild things, so they were starting from scratch. Countries like India, which doesn't have high-speed rail, but is some of these third world countries that are starting with nothing, it's easier for them to jump right into it. We have this old kind of infrastructure. And again, I hate to say use the word because I use it so often, but a lot of people do, it's just the invest into it. What Elon Musk is doing with the Hyperloop, which is kind of like a high-speed train, it's like in a little vacuum. Things like that, it's going to take, unfortunately, I don't think the government's going to be able to do anything right now with the amount of money that's in politics, but it's going to be those private entities coming and putting pressure on those, main channels of investment. It's like the private space industry when people are allowed to start sending rockets up and doing it at a lesser cost. Elon Musk talked about going to Mars before even the United States. So sometimes it takes outside pressure to make change within a government to start those regulations. And I think that's what you're going to do with a lot of these high input stuff like energy, rail, and some of the infrastructure. And space exploration too. Space exploration is going to take off now that private companies can go into space a little bit. Because I was so disappointed with George Bush. Well, George Bush wanted to go to Mars, then backed out of Mars. Then Obama cut, because he had to make some cuts, cut the whole space program down. And we haven't made too much progress really since we landed on the moon. We did land on the moon though, that's not a fallacy. I think we did land on the moon.
That's still being debated by some people.
Alternative facts.
Yeah, but, that's still, and keeping our, just kind of that explorative, because at some point, we need a backup plan if we can't do enough quick enough.
We're liable to hit a
Space junk,
crisis
you know?
first.
I know, there's space
We
junk.
haven't even let the private, whatever up there.
We got a Chinese satellite coming down, by the way, soon.
We got a bunch of little bits of space junk up there running around. Any of it could kill us. There's tons of it up there.
Yeah.
Who's cleaning up the space junk? Which is
Well,
not you, obviously, but.
Luckily, right now, we're actually doing that with oceans, though. There's a lot of programs right now to clean up our oceans because you're getting these pockets of ocean right now that are just full of plastics. And luckily, there's a lot of environmentalists, private individuals going out there and cleaning the oceans up. And that kind of huge change, unfortunately, can't come from government sometimes because there's too much bureaucratic process. You can fight for it, but some of that has to come from the outside, putting pressure on
So do you
government.
think these private companies will clean up our space junk for us? This is
At some
something I
point.
wanna know.
If it affects their
When it
ability
gets
to
in their
travel,
way.
yes, they will.
And it affects their ability to launch satellites up without having to reshoot satellites
Or
back
it starts
up.
becoming cost prohibitive because of the space junk.
I don't want to get whacked by a piece of metal or whatever. If it's a meteorite, I would, because that's worth some money, little meteorites, but,
Not a few, they go, but.
well, it may not get a little sensitive me a little bit, but I'm just kidding. But, so that's what I like to see, and it's just unfortunate that we can put incentives. Anything ultimately comes down, and I hate to say this, comes down to money. And if you put incentives down for people to create if certain individuals start to create innovation and it becomes scalable, then you can offer incentives to implement that, like we saw with the home energy credits that a lot of people got to. Yes, sir.
I think everything comes down to willpower, not
Yeah.
money.
Well, you're in Will County, so willpower.
Yeah, right? So what is your ideas, do you have any thoughts on how to create the willpower within the constituents of Illinois
Mhm.
to not shop at Amazon, not shop at the big agribusiness, not, do all the things that are killing us?
Yeah, so like the sales tax thing with Amazon, which we do collect sales tax, but not at the actual rates of the local governments. But it's a tough question because a lot of people don't have that will right now. They want to move.
They want to move, or they want to shop at Walmart and buy the cheapest product.
Mhm.
They want to get the cheapest education. They want to
Yeah.
get the cheapest everything.
Well, it's building that generational, it all comes when creating a family, you want to build generational wealth, or at least stability. And you have to provide basic core things, decent education, decent health care, decent social services, mental health services, and just a decent kind of economy. You know, you can make a living and not have to struggle and work 4 jobs, 3 jobs. That builds people's hope and inspiration that they don't have to shop. Unfortunately, Amazon is the second highest second most popular search engine outside of Google for any type of product. It's become, unfortunately, where people go to check if a product even exists. At some point, they're going to get to an antitrust thing. At some point, they're creating way too big of an opportunity. They're going to have to be split up. It's just going to happen. They're going to try to get away from that, but there's going to be a thing like Microsoft, and they're going to have to split up. You can't combat that, unfortunately. What we did combat, which was a good thing, was letting them pay sales tax, making them pay sales tax to us. So that kind of stops some of, right? People just are in a mindset right now, they want to be more casual, right? They don't want to have to go to the store. That's why online sales and retail stores have failed significantly. Is people like from the comfort of their home, it's 10 o'clock at night, I just want to buy, something real quick, So that, I don't think it's just a human shift, right? It's a shift of just nature. But building that wealth up builds into the generational wealth, the generational stability, allows even small businesses, because when those people have money to buy a little more than basic groceries, basic healthcare, things like that, they go to the little hobby stores like some of my hobby stores and things like that, because they can afford to do those things and be built on a more personal level. It's going to be a very tough generational shift to move away from the Walmarts, the Targets, the Amazons, because people are so used to convenience. But when they do have that more stability, they're more propensity to buy locally and do local things that maybe cost a little more, but have a higher value at that point. But right now, if they're struggling to get by, they're going to go for the cheapest cost option, which is Walmart. And if they're not making enough money, they're using EBT cards, they have to go to Walmart, Target, things like that, because not every small business can afford those cards. Any other questions? It's getting late, it's past my bedtime, I think.
You got 2 other events to do, don't you?
I'm telling you, I'm up at like 5 and going until about 9, then my brain sort of shuts down a little bit.
Well, we're getting.
9?
All right.
Why so early?
But
Well, but like 4 or 5.
I encourage you guys next week. It's next week, right? Come here, see, and one of the candidates is out in that event, so you'll see one less that's still in it. But ultimately, these kind of forums, and I like that one especially, that our Revolution one, because Mary Ann kind of like pushed everybody a little bit. She even pushed me a little bit. I had a, you'll see if you watch it.
Care to answer that question?
Yeah. Well, no, that one was around, I brought up about equal mental health. So making sure that people that go to jail have, or commit a crime due to like opioid use. I'll tell the whole thing. It was Bruce Rauner's son had an opioid addiction. He went to a Walgreens, threatened to kill somebody, went to jail, got the help he needed real quick, didn't serve any time, got the help he needed, got the mental health services, got the addiction services that he needed, and now is a functioning member of society. She pointed out that I called out a specific name, but I wanted to show that you tell me that in here, Southside Chicago, anybody else gets that opportunity?
No.
It doesn't. And I'm glad his son is healthy now. That's all it's about. Addiction's horrible to people, and they do bad things like what he did.
Yeah.
But he was given the opportunity to correct himself and be a functioning member of society, and you can't say that about any other place if he didn't have money, unfortunately.
Right.
I'm glad he's cured, but you
I
could
wasn't
say.
even aware of that. It's
Yeah.
news to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I do have one question for you.
Yeah.
How do you remove the privatization
Mhm.
of governmental services? So how do we take the privatization out of our schools, out of our prisons, out of our social services? In Illinois, we have children that are dying because DCFS isn't funded, or because there are foster homes that are run by for-profit corporations. So how do we do that?
It's a banning of certain industries from being privatized. I mean, we already do that in a semi-way with private prisons in Illinois. We don't have very many private prisons in Illinois.
We do have detention
Yeah.
centers, though.
Yeah, that's true. As I said, most, but.
And they're not technically prisons, detention centers.
And you know about, if anybody knows any research about detention centers, or I'll say private prisons, is that the state is mandated to keep a certain amount of percent capacity.
Mhm.
And if the state dips below that capacity, the state is fined and pays money to the private prisons.
Yeah, I know, it's true.
So you mentioned legalizing cannabis.
Yeah.
That's going to take a huge chunk out of the for-profit prison system.
Mhm.
How are you going to be able to get that on board, get the people who are in those positions who control the prisons that are for,
Mhm.
how are you going to get there?
Yeah, so first off, 80% of Illinois, through referendum, it would pass legalization of marijuana like that. Would pass. 80% already agrees with us and everything of that nature. It all goes back, our criminal system's been broken since Bill Clinton. He was a fellow Democrat, hate to criticize Democrats, but he gave us the 3 strikes rule. He broke up families. He had good intentions, I think, at the time, but it unfortunately broke up a lot of families and split families and made career jail, people that have been in jail career because they passed the 3 strikes they're out rule. Mandatory minimum sentences occurred, and that opened Hell's Gate. So it starts with that. It starts with doing our best we can to move from funding prisons to funding rehabilitation. Because most of the homeless population that we have, some of the repeat offenders is due to rehabilitation programs. And it's something, and I hate to like put the two together, but even veterans too, when they don't see that they have an opportunity to be a functioning member of society and don't see that brotherhood or camaraderie and they can function outside of what they were in before, they turn to sometimes bad things, and they turn to homelessness at some point, and they lose hope. And that's what we need to change, is fund rehabilitation programs, because it's cheaper to rehabilitate somebody than it is to put them back in prison. That's the reason why we don't have the death penalty too, because it actually costs more to kill somebody than it does to actually keep them alive for the rest of their life. But, and I think it's ethically wrong to do such a thing. So that's what we need to do, and that's how we just need to shift the funding from, and that comes from the state. It comes from legislation that pushes that through the state.
What is your opinion of the philosophy of Tom Dart, who was the sheriff of Cook County? I think he's really an innovator, and from what I've seen, what little I've seen of his exposure on TV, he's trying to do a lot of things for the good of people and to decriminalize the whole thing. Have you ever talked to him?
I've not talked to him. I've studied a lot of this, and the fact of the matter is that when kids grow up without fathers, when they grow up with split families, they have a higher rate of going and doing bad things sometimes. And what Bill Clinton did in '96, I think it was or '95 or '96, added to that strain to families.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about Tom Dart, who's the Cook County sheriff. He's done a lot. They just had a thing about last week about him.
I'll look him up again.
Yeah, I think the two of you would gel good.
I like his last name. It's kind of cool. Very to the point.
How do you
Pun
feel about-
intended.
Yeah.
How about state-funded, self-sufficient prisons? If you consider things like Stateville. Stateville used to be a working prison. They provided the food for the prisoners. They had an auto shop on site, again, offering training, offering development, education.
There's their own food too.
Yeah, they provided their own food,
Yeah.
everything was done within. Of course, social elements caused a lot of issues, and it became more maximized, and then the riot and everything, so it went down to
Yeah.
24/7 lockdown. Now, you go in, you're not getting out, pretty
Yeah.
much, ever. How do you propose to fix that?
So-
Besides, do you retroactive?
So sometimes prisons need to be closed and moved to other facilities and do different things for a fresh start. And what a lot of programs I've seen succeed are work programs. So there's this one program, I forgot what state and what prison does it, but pretty much you have to apply to it for being on good behavior and showing willingness to learn. They make pizzas, like they made fun of it on the Daily Show recently about yeah, it was Cook County. It was Cook County. That's right.
Found out.
Yeah, and they're making pizzas, because they were joking that Chicago deep dish pizza isn't real pizza. It's like whatever, but they were making.
It's the only pizza.
I like it. I like Lou Malnati's, like the the good corn crust. But so they were, they applied for these, and that was like the highest position that you could get, and people were like fighting for it. You know what I mean? They were like saying, "I want to do good, so I can become part of this program." They were learning all the skills, so when they get out of prison, they can work on a restaurant line, things like that. So things of that nature, and those programs for people that are actually doing good and want to improve their lives that's that rehabilitation that needs to happen within the prisons. I saw a documentary where they're now shipping the food in from like Georgia or something. And it's like mush and it's unnutritious and it's like it goes bad half the time and it actually costs more to do that. Overall, it costs less, but the overall human factor costs more, and the healthcare and the health issues that occur with inmates. So that needs to happen. And I'm going to leave out one thing that's sort of related is that this, if you get elected to when you get elected to Congress. Is that we don't do enough for moving veterans from jobs in the military to real life jobs. We ask them, medics that have probably served more hours than any nurse or any nurse or any doctor. We ask them to then go to a 4-year school and say, you got to relearn everything you just learned. Add that. We get free education being part of the military, but they can't start jobs. That kind of shift of moving veterans from jobs they were doing and transferring those to actual degrees in the real world needs to happen. Because if they're good enough to fix somebody in Afghanistan, they sure enough can fix somebody here. That's what needs to change. And that's moving people from different environments successfully to common society, different society.
And there needs
back
to be
home.
better support networks. I mean, the whole way that you transition from the military is challenging in and of itself.
Yeah.
When you come back from a tour, you're isolated from your family because you're going through the process, which you can be up to 3-4 months.
Mhm.
And you see your family and things, but you're still living on base. You're still in that environment.
Well, when you're at tour, sometimes you're going 9 to a year and a half, 9 months to a year and a half.
Right. But you're home, and
Yeah.
that they don't have the support systems that they need in order to transition. They don't have the psychological care that they need. They don't get the medical care that they need in order to make that transition successful, which is why you see such high addiction rates, because you're in a state of fight or flight for that time period that you're there. Your adrenaline is up, especially if you're deployed overseas. You're in a constant state of constant heightened state.
Yeah. And you see high suicide rates, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So when they come back, there isn't the camaraderie, but there's also an intense feeling of loss and hopelessness because there isn't something that they can be doing because no one's addressed the issues of them being in a constant adrenalized state.
Or even that is the fact is the will to, that's why I like to hire my veterans, because it gives them something to do. It gives them something to look forward to and use the skills that they, I got a lot of technicians in my shop, so they can do that. They work on Humvees and stuff like that. Now they don't work on Humvees anymore, but they're working on.
The skills are transferable.
It's just something to do. It's something to keep them occupied, and it's transferring. Is being part of something anymore. There's a huge. I don't agree with the CEO's policy, but there's in Carroll Stream. There's a company called Grunt Style, which is they do. You've probably seen the logo. They have a big American flag on the side. They got a little cross thing, and that's a huge shop of veterans. They employ 400. He just started about 5 years ago. About 400 veterans, and it's a big thing right there, and they all fit in. They all work well. He actually did a thing that I thought was very courageous of him too. He actually raised his employees' salaries. It's David Attrick, because when the income tax rate went up, he didn't want them to have to pay the burden of the income tax. So he actually raised all their wages so that they would be at the same take-home pay as they were before. But not everyone can do that. But we got to stop that and actually have a fair tax system at some point. All right.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Again, if you want to get involved with any of the campaigns, please speak with the candidates or let us know. There's a lot of local races going on. Many of you are familiar with the candidates. We've had a lot of them out. I encourage everyone to just get involved. Petitioning is going on for another 6 weeks. Hit those doors if you need notaries. As everyone knows, we're here every Friday night with our stamps. And we hope to see everybody here next week.
Please sign Alex's petitions on your way out. You're all residents of Illinois.
Are you? Where's your IDs? I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Have a great night.